Guru Nation, welcome back to the Clinical Trials Guru. I've got Simon Corman. We're at a very tiny conference here called DIA.
Nice to meet you.
You may have heard about it. Simon is from HyperCore, biz dev. He's a consultant. Well, why don't you introduce yourself, Simon?
Sure. So it's Simon Corman. My current engagement is with HyperCore International as well as LMC Mana Research. My background is really kind of all over the place. Originally in Central IRB, and I've been a product of Central IRB consolidation, and now we're really seeing that to pick up in the site space as well. So there's been a lot of parallels, I think, across the two.
A lot of parallels. So let's actually focus on that for this interview. Well, before we get into that, because I'm very interested in that, how did you get started in research?
So I actually had a Central IRB in Canada. It was the largest Central IRB. And it all started around the same time in the early 90s when research really moved out of the institution into the community. So that's also when you saw a lot of the PIs starting to move out of that institution and setting up their own practices and research groups. Through that, as most people know, the IRB consolidation has really picked up steam. It's basically at its end now with most of the market being consolidated, and I was a product of that. So being the largest IRB in Canada, we were added to what's now Advera, and still that division still continues.
So why do you think consolidation is occurring? Because we've seen it occur with the CROs. Now we're starting to see it with the sites. I was just interviewing Dr. Kingsley earlier about that. Why is it happening with the other vendors in the industry now?
Sure. I think the big thing is that we're all pushing for efficiency. So the goal of consolidation is to maximize efficiency. And along with that, focus on adjacent services that are maybe not traditionally part of your core competencies, but still can tuck into what you know. And therefore, there's a skill set that you're bringing and an authenticity, I think, particularly in the sites, which has been the last piece of, if you want to call it, the clinical research continuum to go into consolidation. So like you said, it was CROs first, then it went into central IRBs, and it's now natural. Let's professionalize the highly fragmented market of sites. I mean, there's 18,000 research sites in the United States alone,
Right.
1,800 or so in Canada, and then globally. So, when you're replicating certain processes like budgets and contracts, feasibilities, it's all siloed. If you can assemble them under mass, the scale, you exponentially realize these economies of scale. That helps everyone. So it's not just a business decision. That's obviously a top driver, but it trickles down all the way down to the patient. So if you can make things more consistent in terms of the experience for the patient, all the way through engagement and even consenting, all the different stakeholders, as they consolidate, there's a feedback loop that gets smaller. In my opinion, so I'm a proponent of consolidation, absolutely.
And we don't want to go over people's heads, but technology is kind of the driving force. It's enabling all these changes, right? So what are some things you're excited about personally in the research industry when it comes to technology?
Sure. So there's a few things, particularly if we're talking about on the site level. Historically, it's been difficult for sites to attain technology to drive their clinical research operations. So CTMSs have been around for a long time. Traditionally, a lot of them have been fairly expensive. They've also been difficult to use. So now the advent of cloud-based systems, it's making it, I think, a lot easier for smaller research sites now to professionalize. And that's really the goal. Let's professionalize the entire continuum. Everyone benefits from that. So technology plays a key part. So that's the CTMS part. So the next thing that we're kind of getting into now is eSource, which it's not brand new, but on a site level, it is. And again, it's the barrier to access that technology has been so high traditionally because of costs, and that's being removed. And you also are seeing, certain providers like WCG and some of the large CROs stepping up to the plate to try to lessen the burden of adopting some of those technologies. Right. But by again through their consolidation, they're able to lower pricing on some of those different technologies that traditionally were prohibitive from a cost perspective.
Final question. Thank you very much, Simon, by the way. Patient recruitment. It's still, regardless of all these tools we have and consolidation,
Yes.
the patients don't care about that, right? But there's a branding issue when it comes to clinical research. If you take 100 people at random who are not in this industry and ask them, what do you know about clinical research? They're going to have negative things to say most of the time, right? Oh, I don't want to be a lab rat, or no, that's weird. So until that branding, clinical research has a
Yes.
branding problem.
It does.
What do you see, if anything, going on to try to boost patient recruitment through raising awareness?
Well, I think that's the key, raising awareness and communicating using modern channels that I think, particularly in clinical research, we overlook. We're very slow to adapt because we're risk adverse. So really looking at, the B2C market, which has a very well-developed marketing machine, if you want to call it, that knows, in a very targeted way how to reach specific populations and deliver a message, and then be able to measure response and then adapt your messaging almost live. So we're starting to just see that creep into clinical research, and I think that's what we really need to do is push those new channels and technologies, much like what you do, to give you credit. It's been very innovative. You're one of the only ones, I think, or maybe the only ones doing it.
Thank you.
So just making the conversation more intimate. Don't just throw content out.
That's right.
You're not going to get the engagement and the authenticity. People, particularly in a social media age, you have to have an authentic relationship.
They can
right?
smell that fakeness.
So transparency is key to all of that. So again, transparency in our industry's not always been what it should be.
Right.
And so I think we're all making strides toward that. It needs to go a lot further, and I think it's starting to pick up some momentum.
Recruitment is the toughest thing in this industry. When I started the blog, it was meant to attract patients. A lot of people don't know that. I started these things to attract patients to my sites.
Yeah.
What ended up happening was other sites were watching, no patients were watching.
Yeah.
So I just shifted the content. That was the easy thing to do, but the real opportunities are in that patient recruitment, and it's tough,
Yes,
and no one's doing it,
absolutely.
and that's opportunity for anybody out there, and maybe the IRBs are going to get involved in that end.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing a little bit of that, like in terms of my personal experience with central IRBs. I mean, patient safety is obviously the number one item that we're looking at, but the ways in which pharma and clinical research engage, the IRBs are the watchdog.
Mm-hmm.
Again, going back to the conservatism of our industry, IRBs, I think in the beginning, were maybe not a facilitator of fostering those new channels for the fear of unknown. But now, with WCG and Advera in particular, they have made huge strides in understanding those different channels to reach research subjects, and how do we do it better. And IRBs absolutely need to be part of that.
It remains to be seen, but hopefully they're on the right track with the WIRB, Center Watch, very content focused.
Yes.
Center Watch has always been patient facing, and I applaud them for that.
Yes.
So hopefully now that we're going to start seeing something, and virtual trials depends on this.
Yes,
trials without the patient
absolutely. I
awareness.
guess that's sort of the new frontier. I'm a bit skeptical of virtual trials.
Oh, good.
Particularly in, the pure virtual trial model.
Completely sightless.
Certain, TAs, certain types of research, I think it's a fit. But a hybrid model, I think that's the one that's going to really be the game changer.
Interesting.
So if you think of all the pain points,
a lot of mixed opinions
right?
on that.
So to me, there's pain points in clinical research,
Yeah.
right? There's pain points for the patient. There's pain points for the site.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can virtualize some of those interactions, so that on a patient, you're not, they don't have the burden of going into an office to fill out, a simple questionnaire. or wearables, which is obviously another big thing.
Yeah.
You know, they can do that remotely. You
No, we
sit
didn't
down
even
in your
talk
chair,
about wearables.
you know, you take your blood pressure and it automatically
Yeah.
sinks in. So a lot of these things were, you know, to borrow a buzzword that everyone's using right now, inflection. We really are in a period of inflection, particularly in clinical research, and it's really figuring out, you know, how do we best use the different technologies in a way that's going to make the experience better for the patient, and then that trickles up, right? So you're gonna your patient participation is going to increase, your retention is going to increase, and I think just general awareness, when people hear and understand, you know, I can participate in a trial. I don't have to go into a lab and be a lab rat. There's portions of it I can do at the comfort of my
Do it at the
home.
house,
And
yeah.
and I think that you can, even though it's virtualized, there's a authentic relationship that I think you can build
That's a good point you bring up.
using technology, right? And let's also face it, there's some things that people are uncomfortable answering.
Sure.
When you know you're interacting with a bot, human nature's funny. We'll actually maybe be more open to
Less embarrassing, less, yeah,
That's right.
I'm with you
Yeah,
there.
or even follow-ups. Like, you know, with questionnaires, sometimes, you know, they might not have time to fill out something or not comfortable answering the questions to a live human.
That's right.
Where, you know, with a piece of technology like Amazon Alexa, that I think is kind of
It's-
removed to a point.
That's a very
right?
good point you make, which is I haven't heard anyone else make before,
Yeah.
so that's good.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
anytime you want to, like, you know, just look at your own, anyone watching or listening, look at your own Google search history, what you've been searching. A lot of those things you would never ask a human being, but you're typing it in the
That's
machine,
right. We
right?
disclose a lot of personal
Yeah.
information online, and we don't have much issue.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, again, you've got to be strategic in the way you deploy it, and really come at it as, you know, to borrow a marketing term, you know, customer first. I don't want to make it cold, because customers and patients are very different, but there's a psychology that's common in terms of buying into participating in a research trial. I mean, there's other indirect feedback mechanisms that pull in, but your psychology and the track that you take, there's a parallel to it. So I think it's
Very
important to think of that when developing these technologies and recruitment strategies.
What is your, as we wrap up, what is your prediction for the next decade? So when we look back on this video in 2030, right, and we say Simon hit it right on the head, or he was way off.
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
what do you
yeah.
think? What do you think the industry will look like? Will it look the same, or is that the only sure thing that it won't look?
Yeah, I think it'll look significantly different on the patient and site side. So I think consolidation with the sites, that will probably be somewhat almost completed within the next decade. And then I think implementing those different technologies that are, you know, somewhat in their infancy. Some of them are well developed already in the, you know, on the commercial
So you
side.
think less sites? Total?
I don't think less sites, but rather than having a fragmented, you know, group of sites that you're engaging, you have one center. So HyperCore is a prime example. It's a mechanism of, let's consolidate in a different way, a slightly looser way. So let's group professionalized sites together and take away the pain points for industry, which is usually, you know, budgets and contracts, feasibility.
So do you think more studies then?
I think more studies, and the other thing I think too is, you know, we haven't even touched upon EMR and EHR.
We have.
And data mining, and then so some of the AI that's in there. So there's one company that I've been working with called Vestrum Health. And what they've done is they've developed an AI technology that will go plug into a retina care specialist's EMR. All of this is through anonymized data.
Interesting.
It will actually look through the retina scans, and then based on the inclusion-exclusion criteria, spit out a list of the identified patients that could qualify for a study.
That's interesting.
And then feeds that back to the PI. And then it's the PI who then decides, you know, should I engage this specific patient? But, I mean, that traditionally is done, you know, virtually, it's a manual process. So if you can build these, you know, data warehouses with, you know, maintaining patient privacy is number one.
Yes.
And I think that's the one thing our industry, even to credit it being slow to adopt, the reason why we're slow to adopt is because we are very aware of the risks to patient data and take it absolutely seriously as number one. So anything we implement, we need to vet properly. And that takes a while, right?
Yeah.
So it's not let's just roll out this new technology and see what happens, like in the consumer goods
Right,
industry.
right.
We need to test everything, right? We have we first pilot it on fictitious data, usually, and then we move it to the next step, which would be anonymized data, again in a sandbox type of environment. And then the next step is using live patient data, anonymized. But it's not that it hasn't been done before. I mean, if you look at the IMS IQVIA model, they were doing that with
What was that service?
pharmacy data, right? So they were anonymizing
MediGuard or something.
pharmacy data, and that was to identify patient populations. So they actually have a technology now.
pre-screen, yeah.
You see, so they're almost like kind of reversing the site selection process. So first, let's identify the patient population that matches that particular trial, and that from that cluster, they actually have the ability to look at through prescription data behavior of that particular PI on the likelihood of whether they would engage in a clinical research trial or not.
You see?
So using all of these different data sets to help make the process more efficient so that you're engaging the right patient, the right researcher. And it's at the end of the day, the theory is it's a win-win for everyone. Win for the patient, the site, and then the industry as a whole.
I've heard a lot of things around the blockchain as well, trying to incentivize patients to share their data. There's some startups focused on that.
And I've heard of those. Putting my IRB hat on, incentives like that, I'm skeptical of. Right? I think it's more than gray. And particularly when you're looking at international trials, there's some that will use the tokens that you can then redeem for a specific procedure that you wouldn't necessarily been able to attain.
Correct.
So as an IRB, you're always looking at, is there a barrier of access that could be viewed as an incentive to participate in clinical research and coercion. So, you got to, I think blockchain, I don't think necessarily has a good fit there. It has a better fit in terms of making sure that the data and the consistency, the consistency of data and that audit trail to verify who's accessed my data. Because let's face it, the world is moving to personalized health data. Like you're gonna own your own health data.
It's like what Craig Lipset probably gave a speech on today. Access to my data as a patient, right?
Yes.
Even your study data.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think
that's right. So that's the whole transparency, which we kind of talked about earlier. It's going to be forced. I mean, let's face it. Particularly as a new generation of clinical research patients, and that we're already starting to see it, which is why the industry's having to pivot. Like, how do we reach? A 19 to 25-year-old? We can't do it the way we did historically. We need to speak to them in the right way and through the channels that they're accessing. So I think, there's a lot of stuff going on.
A lot.
So
It will be fun to look at this in 10 years and see how it went. But thank you very much, Simon. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
It was great. Thank you, everyone, for watching, listening. Where can people find you? Do you want people to find you?
LinkedIn, it's Simon Corman.
I'll put the links underneath.
So, and then of course HyperCore International's the current endeavor, and the LMC Manor Research is another large research site network in Canada that I'm involved with. And then industry as a whole, I'm kind of all over the place, even on the private equity side.
Congrats on the Raptors.
So that was good, huh?
Congrats.
The whole city went crazy.
Yeah, that's right.
I think there was 2 million people out on the streets of Toronto.
Unbelievable.
So,
Only a few got shot, so that's
That's right. It's not
it's
New
a
York,
success.
so I think we're pretty good.
All right, thank you very much, Simon.
All right.
Thank you, everyone, for watching,
Take
listening.
care.
Catch you all later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.